Every once in a while, a wave of complaints and concerns arise about the state of DBD. The complaints and concerns I'm referring to in this video are centered around this idea that Killer is getting more difficult to play. Whenever these complaints and concerns arise, I have a good laugh. As a legacy player, I have had the unique privilege to play this game since the beginning, so I've experienced and witnessed this game trudge through the lowest lows when it comes to balancing. And to claim that Killer is getting more difficult in modern DBD is just funny to me. And I'm not dismissing any valid concerns with any current perks, maps, or other features, but the fact is Killer was incredibly arduous to play in the early days, and a sizable amount of the current day complaints hold little to no weight. To be frank, I believe a lot of newer Killer players would simply not be able to endure the older versions of the game, as there have been a myriad of changes over the last almost decade now that have largely benefited Killers. For the sake of historical awareness and to provide a gentle reminder on how different things were in 2016 compared to now, I've compiled a quick list of the survivor-sided and killer-sided features that existed at some point in 2016 or beyond. I may have missed a few things, but this was just a quick list that I compiled. For 2016 survivor-sided stuff, we have infinites, syringes and styptics were instant heals, gen speeds, good and great skill checks provided more progression in gen completion, stronger loops on maps in general, way more pallets on all maps except for maybe Shelter Woods. Blood Lodge, for example, was literally a field of pallets at one point. Thicker mist offerings actually thickened the fog much more than they do now. Dark Moonlight offerings existed. No exhaustion, only perk cooldowns that allowed perks like Sprint Burst, Balanced Landing, and Adrenaline to be used in immediate succession. Pallet and window vacuums. Instant use of Decisive Strike. Healing was faster. Medkits and toolboxes were stronger. Brand new parts, instantly repaired a full generator. Keys could instantly open the hatch and allowed for more than one survivor to escape. Gen kicking was not a thing. Very few slowdown perks existed for Killer. Sabotaging hooks was permanent, same with Trapper's Traps, but it was nerfed a little bit later that year. Fast vaults were really easy to get. Killer's vaulted windows slower. Entity window blocker wasn't a thing until September 2016. No bloodlust existed. Killers kicked pallets much slower. Pickup times were also slower, thus making flashlight saves and pallet saves way easier to get. Insta-blind flashlights were a thing. And finally, Object of Obsession. And for 2016 killer-sided stuff, we have Moris that worked without hooking survivors, Nurse, Machine Gun Build, which was Save the Best for Last, plus Unrelenting, Noed, which had no timer and no totem, Trapper could trap directly under hook survivors, Instasaw for Billy when combined with old add-ons and with the old version of Tinker, and finally, face camping was essentially impossible to save against without the killer messing up. There could very well be more stuff that was killer-sided back in the day that I'm just not remembering, but feel free to let me know if I missed something that I should have remembered. So even with this list of survivor-sided stuff being much longer than the killer-sided stuff, one extremely important point to remember is that when DBD was new, so were the players. The optimal strategies had not all been fully fleshed out or utilized. For example, stealth was way more commonplace in the beginning, with pallet looping eventually becoming what it is today only after several nerfs to map tiles and windows. As time progressed through 2016 and through the next few years after that, the strength that survivors had in certain areas of the game became very evident. When survivor nerfs happened in the months and years after, the nerfs generally made sense and were understandable or necessary. This is not to say that there are no current balance problems in DBD for either side today, but ultimately at the highest level, DBD has always been slightly survivor-sided, assuming survivors play as perfectly and efficiently as possible. What typically ends up determining the outcome in most DBD matches is one side successfully capitalizing on the mistakes made by the opposing side. Whether this power dynamic is fair at the highest level is a completely separate discussion though. Another important thing to keep in mind is that with DBD, there are always going to be situations where the control is just out of your hands. I've personally experienced this countless times as survivor and killer. You also have to keep in mind that the overall player skill level has reached higher highs as time has progressed. So unless you're playing as optimally and perfectly as possible, there's always a chance that a match will not work out in your favor. It It would also be wise for me to note that with the killer roster as large as it is now, it is much more difficult to keep all killers relatively fair, balanced, and on the same level playing field. And I'm certainly not saying that the killers in 2016 were more closely aligned in terms of strength. I'm referring to the substantial increase in different powers, perks, add-ons, and other things as this ever-growing list creates more variables to play with, which in turn creates more possibilities to try and balance around. And as we've all probably seen, killer tier lists have become a never-ending discussion topic due to the discrepancies in overall strength among killer powers. All of this to say, I believe it's important to keep perspective as to how far this game has come since the olden days. It's just a plain fact that survivors have persevered through significantly more nerfs since the game launched, and thus survivors have been forced to either adapt or get left behind. Killers have generally had the opposite experience, with more universal buffs being granted and individual killer powers being fine-tuned as the years progressed. There are times where killers are forced to adapt as well, but the number is nowhere close to being equal to what survivors have experienced. If anything, most of what killers have been forced to adapt to is the direct result of survivors having to adapt to more efficient strategies, referring to looping, gen progression, and healing as examples. So it's kind of a chain reaction in a way. Over the years, I've sort of subscribed to the idea that DBD can be at its most fun when everyone just brings busted shit into a match. Forcing survivors to be more efficient at gens is just not that fun for either side. So if there's any wishful resolution that I have, it's that the power balance shifts to a point that allows for both survivors and killers to have an equal amount of powerful loadouts that can rival the days of 2016. That way, everyone can just duke it out more evenly without stressing about playing as efficient as possible. Fun is the reason everyone plays DBD, right? As a bonus wish, all of what I have just said is also why I firmly believe the 10th year anniversary event should just be a redo of 2016 DBD, with some appropriate changes to help keep things a little balanced, of course. I say it's time to let old DBD out of the vaults for all to experience once again. And that's all I have. Thanks for watching.